Welcome to Let's Hear It.
Let's Hear It is a podcast for and about the field of foundation and nonprofit communications, produced by its two co-hosts, Eric Brown and Kirk Brown. No relation.
Well said, Eric. And I'm Kirk.
And I'm Eric. The podcast is sponsored by the College Futures Foundation, which envisions a California where post-secondary education advances equity and unlocks upward mobility now and for generations to come. To learn more, visit collegefutures.org.
You can find Let's Hear It on any podcast subscription platform.
You can find us online at letshearitcast.com. You can find us on LinkedIn and, yes, even on Instagram.
And if you like the show, please rate us on Apple Podcasts so that more people can find us.
Let's get on to the show.
It's wonderful seeing you today, Mr. Brown.
Well, it's wonderful to be seen, Mr. Brown.
I want to introduce a word.
A key
it's
word.
Very relevant to the conversation that we're about to listen to, which was terrific once again. By the way, thank you for doing this for all of us. Plain spoken.
Plain spoken. That's two words.
Okay. No, it's not. It's a compound word, isn't it? Isn't it one word?
Oh, okay.
This is one of the most plain spoken, brilliantly so, guests that we've ever had on Let's Hear It. And I cannot wait to dig into this discussion. And there's some pitching, there's some placement, there's some product highlighting I want to do before we get into the conversation on behalf of our guest. But set this up because this was really excellent. It's timely, it's important, it's necessary. But the plain spoken conversation that's about to happen here it's good for us all, I think. It's good for all of our souls.
Oh, good. Because, our souls are needed.
Yes, they do.
I interviewed Vule, who is the brains behind Nonprofit AF. And who is a former nonprofit executive director and is bringing all of the fun and games that came with that to bear against philanthropy, and not against, but in favor of better philanthropy. And Vu is, I had wanted to interview him for a long time, and I realized that it was going to be an exciting roller coaster ride, and Vu did not disappoint.
So Vu is plain spoken. Vu is super funny. Vu is also an outstanding writer. So, of course, everybody should go to Vu's blog, Nonprofit AF. But I want to pitch a couple of things for Vu. So first, Vu has a book coming out on October 14th. It's called Reimagining Nonprofits and Philanthropy, Unlocking the Full Potential of a Vital and Complex Sector. That comes out on October 14th, and you can order your copy now, and I think you should. So that's coming out on October 14th. And then also, Vu has been on a little bit of a sabbatical off the blog, and he's going to be coming back on August 19th with his next blog posting. He's actually moving his whole thing over to Substack, it looks like, from WordPress. So I just wanted to do those couple of quick shout outs. But Vu, and then of course you're going to hear about maybe a one-man show that Vu maybe could
right
avail to the world. And I want to say right up front, please, Vu, share that with us, give it to us. But Eric, this was terrific. Vu, thank you for coming on the podcast. I think we should listen to you guys talk, and then there is a lot to unpack from this when we come back.
You may be right.
Okay, well, this is Vule joining us on Let's Hear It. Let's listen and we'll come back.
Welcome to Let's Hear It. My guest today is somebody I've been wanting to have on this show for a really long time. It is none other than Vule. You're an activist, an iconoclast, a muckraker, a nonprofit ass kicker, and you're the founder of Nonprofit AF, which is what it sounds like. Vule, thank you so much for coming on to Let's Hear It.
Hey, Eric. Thanks for having me. Nonprofit AF, by the way, stands for Nonprofit and Fearless.
Of course it does. Thanks so much for coming on. I've been watching you, and I heard you came to ComNet, the Communication Network Conference, and I've been reading your work for a really long time. Can we just talk a little bit about how you got to this place, sitting here talking with me, and really trying to, I think, hold philanthropy and nonprofits' feet to the fire?
Yeah, I was actually pre-med. I was supposed to be a doctor.
Oh.
Yeah. And then I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. So I dropped out of that pre-med path and got a master's in social work.
Yeah.
Which you can imagine nearly got me disowned by my parents.
Why?
They were hoping at least one of their kids would become something meaningful. And social work apparently is not the most in our community. It's not the most respected profession, which is too bad because it's awesome. I really like the path that I took. And yeah, I got my master's in social work. and then joined this AmeriCorps program because no one would hire me because I didn't have enough experience. So I became an AmeriCorps member for 2 years and then became an executive director of a nonprofit in the third year.
And what was that like? So you go from AmeriCorps to being an executive director.
Yeah, these AmeriCorps programs can be really great here. It's a path to leadership.
There you go.
Yeah, so it was definitely very shocking. And I think it wasn't just because I was brilliant. It was also because, one, no one really wants to be an executive director. And two is the organization that I was placed at did not have a very good reputation. So definitely no one wanted to be in that position. And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna turn this organization around. And I stuck around, and I think I did.
And so my guess, we haven't talked about this yet, but my guess is that being a nonprofit, executive director of a nonprofit, was like really easy to fundraise. Your funders were like really easy to work with. Everything was really smooth as silk, right?
It's so easy. You only work 20 hours a week. Money just come pouring in. Funders call you up all the time. We want to give you money. And you're like, no, get in line.
And we want to give you general support. We want to give it for many years.
There were no night terrors caused by cash flow issues. There were no screaming into the void that I did every night or so.
And you didn't have to fill out all sorts of crazy reports. It was just easier.
It was very easy. It was so easy. It did not age me 20 years at all during those years. Right, during those 3 years that I was an ED.
Okay, so you come out of that, and then what happened?
The organization went pretty well. I was there. It was rough the first few years, and then it got better. And I started writing. So one of the funders to my organization asked me to write a blog post from a grantee's perspective. So I thought, okay, you can't really turn down a funder. So I was like, all right, fine. I'll write this blog post for free. Fine. And it caught on, and people liked the fact that I was like, you know what, I think there's too much academic stuff already. So I'm going to use a more lighthearted tone. So the blog posts I wrote were pretty silly in comparison. And I think people really just needed to laugh. There's a lot of humor in our sector. We have to laugh at ourselves.
By the way, there was a show, I think it was about 10 or 15 years ago, called The Foundation. And it was, did you see it? You got to go back and find it on YouTube or something like that. It was the hilarious version of, not hilarious, it's like the Foundation executive is a spy. He's like a James Bond guy, and he's really dashing and handsome, and it's totally ridiculous. It was inadvertently funny.
That's hilarious. I think we definitely need more shows about nonprofit.
We should, about dashing James Bond Foundation executives. So yeah,
some of them can be very dashing. When you have that much money to give away, your attractiveness increases 27% instantly.
My old boss at the Hewlett Foundation, the president of the foundation, he had this little plaque on his desk that said, "With money in your pocket, you're handsome, you're funny, and you sing well too."
Exactly.
At least he had a perspective on this. Yeah, so you're funny, and you're trying to, it sounds to me, you're applying critiques to, especially to philanthropy, but nonprofits as well, using humor and other ways to try and get a very important message across, which is what?
One is that the sector is really important, right? I criticize nonprofit philanthropy because I really do believe in our sector. I believe that we make change every day. We make a difference in the world. Some of the most important advances in civil rights and everything have been in great part because of all these nonprofits and all these leaders who worked to advance these things. So our sector, I think of it as like air. Like the metaphor I would use is that our sector is like air, whereas other sectors are like food. People can see food, they can see their iPhones, they can see movies, but the work that we do is oftentimes invisible. People don't really think about it until they really need it. They don't think about like food pantries until they may have lost their job and their savings are dwindling. They don't think about senior centers until their parents start aging or they themselves start aging. And so people don't think about nonprofits, and they take us for granted. And that leads to a lot of stuff that can be very challenging for us. But the other thing is, I feel like we need to acknowledge that the existence of our sector, of the existence of nonprofit and philanthropy, is an indication that something is not right with the world. We should not have this many nonprofits. We should not have that many foundations in the first place, right? If the world were perfect, our sector would be a lot smaller.
This is a common critique of philanthropy, is that it shouldn't exist, is that we live in a culture that requires us to backfill and reverse engineer and try and improve things that should be better than they are now. I don't know. What do you do with all that, given that we have this phenomenally imperfect sector? What do you think philanthropy can actually do?
When we talk about philanthropy, I think it's really important to distinguish the difference between progressive leaning philanthropy and conservative philanthropy. Conservative philanthropy has been extremely effective. It has been, and it's been responsible in great part to what we are seeing right now. Conservative philanthropists have been investing in things like the Heritage Foundation, in the Federalist Society, the Cato Institute, like Turnpoint USA and other conservative institutions and movements and leaders. It's responsible for supporting all of these conservative pundits and voices that we keep hearing on the radio and on TV and on social media and on YouTube and all over, right? So they've been extremely effective. They have been able to get Supreme Court justices onto the Supreme Court and shape the judiciary that way. They buy politicians and so on. In the meanwhile, progressive philanthropists, progressive leaning ones, have just been so tentative and risk averse and funds 1 year at a time and are mired in toxic intellectualizing. And that's why we have not been very effective.
It's interesting. I have a hypothesis that we lost the election because of jargon, and which is that the progressive world talks in these mystical ways that a lot of folks don't understand, and therefore say, hey, look, I don't feel like I'm a part of that. And it makes it really easy to point a finger at those folks as being elitist, out of touch, talking down to us, and all that other stuff. And that one of the things that we can do is just say what we mean. What do you think of that?
I agree with you, but the problem is that we don't actually agree on what we mean. We need to acknowledge, for example, that a lot of people who are in power, a lot of the politicians, political leaders, and so on, like, they actually don't want the system to change.
Yeah.
Because what we mean is we need to tax billionaires. That's easy to understand. Okay. Stop allowing billionaires to avoid paying taxes and then get to do whatever the hell they want. That's very easy to understand. But if they themselves don't actually believe that, like, they don't, like, we have so many philanthropists who still believe in capitalism. They will proudly declare themselves to be capitalists, and and they don't want to tax billionaires. They don't think billionaires should be taxed out of existence like many of us on the ground do. So the messaging won't come if we're not in agreement about what they are. When the people in power, they basically want things to stay the same.
That's another critique of philanthropy, which is it was created out of this capitalist system in which a lot of people, so it's a relatively few people, but now more, are making astonishing amounts of money, and that they're giving a little bit of it back as a way to either purchase indulgences, feel better about themselves, or whatever. And that some folks genuinely do want to make a difference, but that philanthropy is like a really lousy way to redistribute wealth versus taxation and things like that. And then how do you square this seeming contradiction of taking the money from that's skimmed off the top from large philanthropy to try and do your best as an executive director of an organization in which you're trying to meet payroll? It's complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, it's complicated, but I'm not so sure it's necessarily needs to be more complicated, because that's one thing that liberals do is we complicate things. Okay? And we say things are complicated when they're really not all that complicated.
I agree.
It's like the rich people, they want to stay rich. Philanthropy has been built on Andrew Carnegie's philosophy of the gospel of wealth, where it's okay to get as much money as you want and as you can, and then give out some of that to buy libraries or whatever that you care about. Right. And so over decades, like, that's what has been happening. And for many of us in the field, we're like, okay, this is a system that we need to change. In the meanwhile, communities and people are still being hurt. So we need to do what we can. Right. There's a lot of mindset we need to shift. Like, one of the biggest mindsets I think about is like this idea that this is other people's money. I feel like for a long time, people are like, oh, this is the foundation's money, or this is like this major donor's money, and we're lucky when they give us any amount of money at all. For a long time, we've internalized these messages, and that has been very terrible, because then we're like deferential. We become grateful instead of what we should be, which is angry that this wealth has been hoarded, angry that wealthy individuals pay less of a percentage of their total wealth in taxes every year, angry that their wealth has been built through inequitable means like slavery and stolen indigenous land and worker exploitation and destroying our environment and stuff, right? And of course, tax avoidance, right? We should be a lot more angry than we have been while we're getting all this funding instead of being what we've been trained to be, which is to be grateful.
So what's next? You've talked about crappy funding practices. You've got the LinkedIn page on that, which is really interesting. But that it seems like there's a more fundamental challenge right now, especially now. And you wrote a piece the other day, I think it was, called "Dear Funders, Your Endowments Will Be Worthless in a Fascist State," which gets to the point of, all right, let's understand that we're not changing the system of philanthropy today, but that there are a lot of philanthropists out there who could make a difference, particularly now in this political climate that is precarious to be really generous.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about crappy funding practices, which is when I started calling out foundations by name. And now it's become a movement led by some really brilliant volunteers who are anonymous because of the power dynamics. But someone can report a funder who does a really crappy time-wasting thing, such as requiring a quarterly report, right? No one should require a quarterly report. There was one funder who required something that needed to be notarized for $5,000 or something. It was so ridiculous, right? So we need to call out. We need to just stop being so nice in the sector, and we tend to beat around the bush and not name things by name sometimes. And I think it's just gotten so bad now that we actually do need to call out funders by name when they do things that are harmful, because we just do not have time for that anymore. And then going back to what you said about, what is happening right now in the world right now is that we are quickly advancing towards fascism. Like democracy is being dismantled right now by the right wing, right? By Trump, by the Republicans. They're doing the horrifyingly scary things, unconstitutional things, such as disappearing people without due process, such as arresting judges who give orders that they don't like. This is very scary things that are happening. That is, like, people who study fascism are saying we're way on that trajectory now. And we need to be able to turn around. But in order to do that, we need funders and nonprofits and everyone to start being all hands on deck. And right now, I'm not seeing that sort of urgency among many of the funders in our sector.
All right. On that incredibly happy note, we're going to take a very short break, and we're going to come back and dig into what philanthropy should be doing. So we'll be right back with Vu Le. You're listening to Let's Hear It, a podcast about foundation and nonprofit communications hosted by Eric Brown and Kirk Brown. If you're enjoying this episode, you may just be a rule breaker. Check out Season 2 of Break Fake Rules with Glenn Galich, CEO of the Stupsky Foundation, as he chats with inspiring leaders in philanthropy, government, media, and more about breaking the fake rules that don't work so that we can build a future that does. New episodes of Break Fake Rules drop monthly. Check them out wherever you get your podcasts. And now, back to the show. And we are back with Vu Le. You are the founder of Nonprofit AF. You are the instigator of crappy funding practices, and you have been vocal right now about how philanthropy needs to act, and it needs to act really forcefully. And I'm also seeing it, maybe you're seeing it now, but if not, I'd love to know your thoughts on this. Folks are starting to call on philanthropy and the nonprofit world to be a lot more full-throated, a lot more aggressive, to spend more money, to really dig in right now, because if not now, when? Can you just talk a little bit about what you're seeing and where you think maybe some signs of hope are, and areas where we absolutely positively have to pay more attention?
Yeah, it's been a long time. I feel like we need to have some acknowledgement that funders' reluctance to fund things over the past several decades, progressive leaning funders again, right, who've always stuck to this 5% payout rule, where they only give out 5% of their endowments every year. And I remember just decades ago going to them and saying, hey, can you give more money for like voter engagement? And they're like, oh, no, that doesn't align with our priorities. No, that's not in our strategic plan. And so they just continue doing whatever it is based on their whims and interests and the flavor of the year or whatever. And that's a patchwork approach to it, is the complete opposite to what conservatives have been doing. They were very targeted towards certain things, such as building institution, creating an army of intellectual warriors on podcasts and everywhere, shaping the judiciary, getting politicians, right-wing politicians elected, and then controlling the media and the messaging through Fox and podcasts and everything. They were very strategic. And then meanwhile, we over here became like the Sky Mall catalog of the causes for funders and rich people to choose from, like a hobby of theirs. Like this time, like, oh, I want to buy this program. And the next year, it's like, oh, this is a great program. I'm going to buy this. That's what they've been doing. I don't know how much acknowledgement right now that funders are saying, wow, that has been a mistake. What I've been seeing is that some funders are like, oh, we need to give out more money. So some of them have been increasing from 5% to 6%. There are some foundations that are increasing to 10%, a few to like 14, 15%, and so on. Some are spending down and etc. So that is good. That's good. They've started signing letters pushing back, but a lot of them have been complying in advance with fascism by getting rid of DEI. So I'm hoping that eventually they'll turn around and be like, no, we're going to support DEI and start fighting back. Signs of hope in our communities. There are some great organizations in our sector that are doing incredible work. I think about the National Council of Nonprofits, for example, and Democracy Forward, and others who have been suing the administration when there was that pause in federal funding. Immediately they took action, legal action, and got an injunction to stop that. I think that saved so many organizations and people, and they're still continuing to fight. So there are incredible people doing really amazing work in the sector right now.
You say you didn't go into medicine, but you're actually practicing some proctology at the moment.
I guess you can put it that way. I don't want to, Eric. Like trying to kick ass and stuff all the time. That's not fun. I want to be able to just, I don't know. I think many of us are so tired because like the stuff I've been saying is not things that are unique and original because I'm so smart. It's things that people have been saying long before I even came along. Especially all like marginalized people, like women of color and trans people have been saying these things for such a long time. And I'm just like one of the voices there who came along and tried to add to it because these things have been said for such a long time and keep getting ignored. And this is the result that we see. This is what happens when we don't listen to the voices of the communities that are most affected by systemic injustice, is that we see this now in the rise of fascism and the destruction of democracy.
Yeah, one of the comments, really interesting comments, is that it's, how do I put this? That when you don't have strong defenses for people who need them, it is a way to chip away at democracy. So the attacks on trans people, for example, is a way to chip away at democracy because these attacks then they take hold, and then you continue to advance the tools that you used. And so you start with people who are the most vulnerable and you move to people who are slightly less vulnerable and so on. And so for a funder who cares about democracy, let's just say, ensuring that people who have the hardest time defending themselves in these areas, that they have the strength that they need to be able to win, is how you defend your democracy. Not just, it's obviously voting is important, but it's not just that. It's about ensuring that these organizations are strong.
Absolutely. All of this that we're seeing are not new strategies that the right wing has been using. Like the attacks on trans people has been out of the playbook of literally Hitler, who as soon as in 1933, when he took over, I think it was that year or the following year, is like the first thing that he did was start rounding up trans people and gay men and sent them to concentration camp and destroying like the Institute for Sexual Studies there that was like helping to advocate for transgender people and LGBTQIA people and so on. And that was the first thing that they did. And they knew, like, this is, you attack the most vulnerable people, and if people don't defend them, you move on to the next vulnerable people, and that's how you get people to be deferential and to put their head down so that they don't get attacked. And so we've been seeing this, and we've been seeing it being replicated, and it's been very disappointing. Like, I see it in, I don't know, even people who are supposed to be getting it, like the New York Times, for example. I don't know, like they have written some things that have just been very terrible and anti-trans, and they're supposed to be on the more liberal and progressive side here. It's been very disappointing.
Yeah, the things are quite difficult right now. Are there areas for hope that you see, apart from you try to keep your good humor in the face of all this? Where do you see the great opportunities coming?
One is I try to remind myself that these things do come in waves, right? They are not unprecedented. And that means that we have hope. And also, in some ways, what we're seeing is like this sort of like last gasp of white supremacy and patriarchy, right? As people start clinging to it. So I don't know. This year is like the year of the snake, and I think about that symbolism a lot. Like we think of snakes as being really evil and talking people into eating forbidden fruit or whatever. But they're also a symbol of renewal and rebirth because they shed their skin. And I feel like maybe in some ways, this is our society shedding the skins of white supremacy and capitalism and patriarchy and waking up to how unfair the system is and what we need to do to radically change it. So that's one thing that gives me some hope, is clinging on to that belief here. If we can survive this, I think it may be it may lead to some like really good things in society. The other thing is like people are still fighting. Like every single day, I see resistance everywhere on the internet, on TV, in the community. There's neighbors are just doing all sorts of creative things. I know there are neighbors who have a spare room that they're now thinking of creating like some sort of space in case a trans community member might need it in order to escape prosecution or whatever. I know there's people who are doing incredible stuff. And I was just reading about this research from a researcher named Erica Chenoweth, who was talking about this 3% rule or threshold, where if you can get 3.5% of the population, the total population, to start rising up consistently, then you have a significant chance to actually overturn the situation here. And in the US, 3.5% is about 11 million people. So that's almost twice the population of New York City, which is a significant amount of people. But just a few weeks ago, we had, I think, half the number of people were out there marching and protests and so on, right? And if we can just keep being consistent and this uprising, mass uprising, I think we have a pretty strong chance of turning things around.
So the left has been criticized for not being able to appeal to a sufficient number of folks in this country. And that's why a lot of folks went over to Trump, that they saw that they were being told that their lives would be better as a result. And it's because that we haven't come up with an inclusive, understanding way to communicate across traditional barriers. Do you think that that's a fair critique? And if so, what is there to be done? Or are we always going to be trying for 50% plus one in this country?
I think if the left would actually just embrace being left, that's the key. We look at the loss of the Harris campaign, for example. They didn't really embrace the left. They were supporting genocide. They were supporting the genocide of Palestinians. And then we had like campaigning with Dick Cheney. We were talking about having the most lethal army in the world and stuff like that. Oh yeah. Why would that attract any progressives? Then we look at progressive candidates, like actual truly progressive candidates like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and AOC for Bernie Sanders, etc. Like they win election because they're like, we're Andy Bashir, like the people who fully embrace progressivism instead of waffling around. Like people don't like wafflers. So the left just needs to stop waffling. We're going to be left, and be left. Talk about taxing the rich. Talk about universal Medicare. Talk about stop supporting genocide. Like, these are things we need to do. So it's not that we have, again, we're not that we have a messaging problem. It's that we can't even agree to be left here. And the people in power, they love being in the middle. Like they're just hedging their bets to see who will win so that they can still get rich off of whichever side wins here, instead of being like full-throated in their support of progressive values. I think that's why we lost.
So what's next? What's next for you, Fu?
I was talking about this one-man show.
Oh yeah, I meant to ask you about that. That was yeah. Tell me about your one-man show.
On April Fool's Day, I put out this joke. I'm doing this tour of my one-man show, and it was called "Please Send Money." Like the joy and agony of nonprofit and philanthropy.
It was gonna be 4 hours long.
And it was pretty silly, including the 17-minute segment where I pretend to emerge from the womb, covered in strawberry preserve and pennies to represent the 9 months that it takes to apply for a grant and get it. It was ridiculous. But people really responded to it. They were like, when are you coming to Houston and Hawaii? And I had to tell them this was actually a joke. I'm not going anywhere. Okay. I'm just trying not to be deported right now. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm just going to continue fighting. I'm going to try to add humor where I can because I feel like the people really need it. I'm trying to remind people to take care of themselves and to find joy where they can because joy is also resistance, trying to build community. And yeah, I'm just gonna, I don't know. I feel like maybe right now my role continues to be to point out all the inconsistencies and to kick ass where I need to, and to also to affirm all the good things that are happening in the sector because there are a lot of good things and a lot of really good people in our sector right now. And we need to always remember that.
We need Vulays in the field, absolutely telling the truth, reminding people how they can improve, helping us remember where we're coming from, where we came from, where we're going. I really appreciate your work. I really appreciate you taking time to speak with us, and keep up the good stuff, man.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate you. Hang in there. We'll get through this.
And we're back. So what a gig. So are you telling me that Vu is able to pay his bills and run his life running his blog, Nonprofit AF?
I don't know. Maybe.
Wow.
Maybe I didn't ask him how he makes his money. That's rude.
Oh, come on. It's the background of all these conversations.
Do you pay your bills hosting a podcast, Kirk, by any chance?
I certainly do not, actually. This is my volunteer contribution, one of many that I make to the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't actually. Yeah, like I said, I didn't ask for. I usually don't ask the guests for financial disclosures.
Is that right?
It's not like that. I have to get their credit report in order to be a guest.
So this is one of those conversations where, and again, Vu's got a book coming out on October 14th. Please order it, and then he'll be back on his blog post on the 19th of August. It's such a great site, and it's so funny and so timely and so engaging. I loved how he set it up, though. He was like, I got invited by a foundation to write something, and so I just went for it whole ham, did it for free. I did it with some humor, which we need in our sector, and I appreciated you dripping your elements of humor throughout this conversation.
Elements of humor. I only have elements.
His capacity just to put it out there and put it in such a plain terms. It was, oh man, it just felt like, he talked about the nonprofit sector as air. This felt like oxygen, necessary oxygen in the room as we do this really necessary soul searching about what is the moment we're in, what are the consequences, what are the costs, but also what do we need to do going forward.
Yeah. And speaking of rooms, there's an elephant in the room, and it's an elephant that I've been thinking about for a really long time since we had this conversation, because Vu talks about genocide. And I have dear friends who have differing opinions on what's going on. And I feel like not wading into the middle of that, I feel like it is at the same time, I don't know. I've been thinking about it a lot. And I thought about, oh, well, what if you just don't air the show and then you have to deal with controversy? But that's not cool. And what if you editor like, no, you can't do that anyway. So the elephant is in the room. It's there. I'm not going to talk about the specifics around genocide, but I just have to acknowledge that it's there. And if people are angry or people are excited, don't come to me to talk about it. And maybe that makes me a coward, but I don't think so. I think that there's just so much suffering that's happening that I'm not qualified to talk about it. I don't know. What do you think about that, Kirk?
Yeah, right. Well, can I actually, I want to take I want to yes and this, and I want to wade into this further, and then this will be the last podcast we ever produce, because this is going to be so contentious.
I don't know. We'll see.
Isn't it fair to say that Vu's providing us a perspective on this fundamental challenge we encounter if we want to put something as audacious as the left across the left, or as progressive across the progressive, or whatever category descriptor you want to provide it, but this diversity of opinion, this robust, aggressive at times diversity of opinion that shows up around all of us that think about how to make the world a better place the way we think about it. As I was hearing you talk about Vu's critique of philanthropy, foundations, nonprofits, the left, like just leaning into what it means to be whatever this movement could be, that was the thing that struck me. I was like, it feels like there's almost a missing critique in here for all of us, which is the incentives are mismatched. I think, like, you and I have had conversations about our opposition and what's under what really is at the root. What's the real heart of what's at stake in this contest of perspectives? And from where I sit, I feel like one thing that's really challenging to work through with all this is that our opposition is actually oddly very deeply aligned in a very core way. And I think in a weird way, part of the left is like this flowering of perspectives. And so
Yeah.
so the fact that there's differences of opinion and
Yeah.
even dramatic ones, that's part of the deal that we're having to sort through.
I take your point. And again, I love the work that Fu is doing. I think he is doing an amazing job of shining light on our field. And yeah, he's part of the left, and he's a full-throated, deeply compassionate, and deeply passionate person. And so anyway, I feel like I'm trying to parse this conversation, but I don't want to. Let's just talk about what we talked about, and we'll get on with it. And then people can like us or not, or maybe we'll get the cards and letters.
We'll talk about weighty things. So let's talk about crappy funding practices. So how about that, right? Calling foundations not by name. So how would it have felt to be sitting in the communications desk and even anonymously, via LinkedIn, being called out by name because somebody says, "Hey, wait a minute, Foundation X, I don't like what you're doing here." What do you think? What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, he's right. Foundations, many foundations are shouldn't be doing what they're doing. And by the way, Glenn Gallich is about to come out with a book on this very topic. I don't want to give any of it away, but if you've read any of Glenn's work, you'll know that he is highly exercised about crappy foundation practices. and he's right. And Vu is a really wonderful other voice in this, because foundations put their grantees through the tortures of the damned to give them tiny bits of money that cost the grantee tons of time and effort in order to get it, and then they're meant to be grateful for it. And if you really want to get things done as a funder, if you actually really want to get things done as a funder, don't do that. But he talked about like foundations as like a SkyMall catalog of whims. Like, ooh, I think I'll buy myself a little bit of these, headphones or, whatever it is. And so those practices must be ended. They must simply be ended. They're not fair. They don't help. They're not going to make change. It's just the egos of the funders and their employees, frankly, that allows that to happen. And they have so much power. And the grantees have to either they take the money and nod silently, or like Vu, they talk about it and they shine a light on this stuff. But I think the underlying point is that if you actually want to make change, then don't do that. If you don't care about making change, I don't know, do whatever the hell you want.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I'm like many of us have been, party to quarterly reports, biannual reports. Like I've received massive support from foundations and then had 12 months to spend it all. And I'm like, it's going to take me 6 months just to hire the team that it's going to take to implement on this work. I mean, so anybody who's worked in this kind of professional philanthropic world, we all know that there's a whole deal here. And it's also, every foundation is an entity of one. Like they're all unique into each other. Like, but at the same time, I've started having my own conversation about this. Do we actually need to sort of reassess our assessments in a way? Like if I'm an organization that's entirely dependent on foundation funding, and so therefore I'm being put through the ringer for all this stuff, maybe actually that's really the issue that I need to address.
Maybe. Although, depending on what it is you do, where are you going to get the money?
Yeah.
Clearly federal funding is not happening.
Right.
Major donors can sometimes you find yourself your angel donor who just gives you the money and doesn't require you to kiss their ass. But the fact is that the model for the social sector in our country, it doesn't work. And we shouldn't need to have, I think we mentioned this in the conversation, we shouldn't need to have as many nonprofit organizations that we do.
Right. It should just work better.
and again, I don't want to give away too much of Glenn's book because I got a chance to review it in advance. Thank you, Glenn. It's amazing that the idea of philanthropy is that once you get your tax deduction, it's not your money anymore. So it's not
Yeah.
like if I write $100 check to the ACLU, I'm not calling them up and say, oh, by the way, I would like you to use my money in this way. Like
Yeah.
you need to put a plaque on the urinal in the ACLU. Like it's for individual donors like this. You write the check, it's general support, and then you frankly don't have much control, and you shouldn't, because it's not your money anymore. And in philanthropy, these foundations and philanthropists have amazing amount of control after they've already taken their tax deduction. And that's, it's the tax system. It's how we backfill the things that aren't being properly done by governments or communities or people working together or whatever. And it's just a crappy system.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, in that conversation about, what we're seeing, just the manifestations of this many, many decades of work that, let's just call it, the opposition has been doing to create the context that we're currently seeing play out across the country. It feels like there's two conversations happening here. So one is the strategy of what has been done and what needs to be done. So this notion of creating institutions, creating intellectual warriors, getting politicians elected, being very, tightly aligned on message. That's a whole kind of strategy of what needs to happen. And I think about the left, as it were, trying to come together around a strategy like that. And I'm like, good luck. Good luck convening the meeting. Good luck getting everybody to come to it. But then the second piece is the how do you pay for it part. And so there's these two things happening in this conversation, because partly the conversation is, hey, up your payouts, get to 5%, 6%, 10%, 15%. So what Vu was talking about. But if there's not a coherent strategy that all that money is going to be dropped into to try to drive progress forward, I wonder about the payout conversation, right? It's like, don't you have to have both in a sense?
Well, you can't legislate a strategy into the tax code, because the idea is that anything that serves a public good is tax deductible. And the left can't legislate the left, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean.
Right.
And we've already demonstrated that the left is
very diverse.
Very diverse. No one's calling the convention of the left saying, like, here's the message of the day. Here's how we're going to beat the opposition. Exactly. That's just not how it works. And I've said this 500 times on this show, which is that being hopeful and progressive in that you want to progress is inherently, you're at a disadvantage from the people who want to tear down, because it's way easier to, the demo in your bathroom takes an hour, it takes a day, and building the damn thing back takes 6 months. It's like, this is just how this is the nature of change. And all I can say is that you have to hope for some set of ideas that obtain in people's consciousness, and that they create the gravity, the heat, and the light that people can move together with. And sometimes that takes single leaders who just step out there and take a chance and people follow them. And sometimes it takes movements, and sometimes those movements are supported by philanthropy, and that's good. And sometimes those movements just come out of a sense of the zeitgeist about what people are feeling and experiencing. And unfortunately, right now, what we're seeing is a movement that is very destructive, and it's very, very defensive, and it is angry and brutal and limiting and stultifying. And a lot of folks, it's very, very hard to push through that. And I just had another friend today tell me he was leaving the country. And wow. So, trying to generate hope among, in this kind of experience is very challenging. And trying to win on that and bring a very, as you say, diverse set of folks together in some level of concert is really challenging. And that's just where we are today. And so if you are a philanthropist and you do want to somehow support those movements, throw the money and get the hell out of the way, and hope that money's going to get used as well as it possibly can, that people do not have to spend their time coming up with cockamamie, theories of change and boxes and arrows and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, so the message to philanthropy being it's not about the money in your bank account, it's the money in the field, and it's the efficacy and the speed with which you can get into the field. That's really what matters, and the relationships you foster to help push that stuff forward. And I think that's exactly right. But I think that this is the fundamental challenge here. I think this notion that if it's progressive and it's public, it warrants support, and that's true. And so we need to provide more support. But I'm still stuck at this notion of like that tear down. It's
Right.
that tear down in service to what? It's that build up in service to what? And in this diversity of our movement, we build up for so many things. Now and I love that concept of the SkyMall catalog for social change. But that's in fact what it is. And in fact, our own podcast reflects it because we've had all sorts of conversations from all these great people across all these different domains. And guess what? They all matter. They're all important.
Yes.
And yes, they're all in service to, we would say, like this better, more socially oriented, more just world in some way. But do they individually add up? Do they create the scaffolding of change, to jumping back to your earlier question, so that you can actually legislate ourselves out of existence because you can reorganize the whole system to actually work more effectively so you don't even need this whole public sector, this whole public service sector. I think that's where there's a little bit of a mismatch here because I think all of our little silver BBs of hope and aspiration, they may not be adding up to being enough to match the monstrosity of what's kind of that's been constructed. Let's say it. It's not even being built. It's been built. And guess what? It's doing its work right now.
Yeah. And not to belabor the point, let's just say, but again, Vu is talking to philanthropy about how to do what it possibly can to allow those kinds of things that you just talked about to happen, which is to allow, yes, there will be no hymnal that everyone has to sing from. But if organizations begin to work together and they have the freedom to make decisions and they have the opportunity to take risks and do all that other stuff, then maybe we might get something done here. But under the current circumstances and the way we do it, it's really hard. I mean, nonprofit organizations that succeed do it often in spite of their funding, not because of it.
So to that point, Vu is a plain spoken truth teller and he's very good at it. He's compelling. He's funny. He's an outstanding writer. And by the way, he has a book coming out on October 14th, Reimagining Nonprofits and Philanthropy, Unlocking the Full Potential of a Vital and Complex Sector. So please buy his book. So he is a truth teller. This is put your chips at the center of the table. How much does our sector actually value that truth?
Yeah.
What do you think about that? And every foundation we've ever talked to has said, we value assessment. We value learning. We want to take risks and learn from our failures as much as our successes. How much do you think our sector actually values this kind of aggressive, soul-searching, truth-telling? What do you think about that?
I think it depends. I think not nearly enough is the real answer. And people want to say, well, what is my philanthropic dollar buying me? And the answer is you don't always know. And you have to be able to not know. And half of the time, the thing that you want to buy, you don't actually end up wanting because there's some better thing to buy that you would never have thought of if you had constrained your grantees with your own set of narrow thinking. And if I sound cynical, Kirk, it's only because I deeply love this field that has nurtured me for so long, and I want it to be really good, and I think it can. But I mean, we saw a lot of foundations fighting the payout. There was talk in Congress about increasing payout, and foundations were fighting that, and that's just not a good look.
Well, I'm going to give you a first-person example of what this looks like. I'll keep it anonymous, and I'm doing this at the end here so you can cut it if it's not going to make the cut.
Okay. I just cut that.
I love it. But that's so true.
So
seriously.
The story that you just told that I cut, we're not going to say what it is.
Yeah.
But if you'd like to summarize your message so that I can save you from yourself, go ahead.
But my message is it could take 8 years to try to get to go when it should take 1 or 2 conversations.
Well,
that's
here's
my
the
message.
other thing. And I've seen a number of foundations that I really I respect a whole lot, and they give long-term general operating support minimal
Yes.
reporting. They build relationships with their grantees, so it's not like they're just writing the check and ducking. They're learning about what they need, and they're providing the grantees with what they need, and they send them on their way, and they encourage them to do good work. And if they make a mistake, they don't penalize them for it, and they don't require them to do crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And if you really care about a field, if you're a funder and you really care about a field, you find those organizations and you make sure they have everything they possibly need to succeed, and you get out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you win at stuff. And that's my take on that. And you go fast as you possibly can and as long as you possibly can. So it's not like you throw a ton of money at them and 2 years later it's like, I changed my mind. I'm going to buy this other thing from the SkyMall catalog. You can't do that either. You have to give this stuff time to work. And so I think those are it feels to me like those are the key messages that Vu is getting at in his own, special, avuncular, funny, cynical, pointed way. And he's he's right. He's really right, and he does it in a way that makes it entertaining, which is cool. Because otherwise, you're just me. I mean, you got this scold here on the podcast. Someone just walked their dog, and I'm like, oh my god, Fido, this dude. So I don't know.
Well, and just think about the potential for success here. If Vu actually succeeds in reducing the administrative costs of all these transactions, that will unleash billions of additional dollars into the field, because that's actually how much all this stuff costs. So, Vu, thank you so much for your work, for being the plain-spoken, truth-telling visionary that you are. Eric, thank you for bringing Vu onto the podcast. That was awesome. Order Vu's new book. It's coming out on October 14th, Reimagining Nonprofits and Philanthropy. And also check out the Nonprofit AF blog, which we will be back to as of August 19th. Eric, that was awesome. Vu, thank you for joining us. Very generous. Once again, another great contribution from us here, I'd say. Okay, we'll see you next time. Oh, I can't believe you cut that. Come on. Okay, everybody, that's it for this episode. Please let us know if you have any thoughts about what you heard today or people we should have on this show, and that definitely includes yourself. And we'd like to thank John Ali, the tuneful and inspiring composer of our theme music.
Our sponsor, the Lumina Foundation.
And please check out Lumina's terrific podcast, Today's Students, Tomorrow's Talent, and you can find that at luminafoundation.org.
We certainly thank today's guest, and of course, all of you.
And most importantly, thank you, Mr. Brown.
Oh, no. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Okay, everybody. Till next time.